Hello, I'm 10.5 years old and I live in the Brazos Valley in Texas. We are preparing to study climate change and I wanted to get some extra credit by making this video. So here goes. The news was on at Grandpa's house and for a week they kept saying that 2014 had been the hottest year. Since the weather people began keeping track in 1880, all the worries about global warming were all coming true. Burning fossil fuels like coal and gasoline has sent tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and that is scary. They kept showing a map of the Earth getting redder and redder as the temperature has gone up. The ice on the North and South Poles is melting, and the water level in the oceans is getting higher. Glaciers are melting, and coastal cities are going to be flooded soon. So I asked my grandpa what his generation could do to fix it. He told me to do the Drew. I'm a big fan of Nancy Drew, and I guess he wanted me to do some detective work. I got my taskbar ready and sat down at the computer. And just like a Nancy Drew mystery, my goal was to follow the clues to prove human use of fossil fuels caused global warming and climate change, and figure out how to solve the problem. The first task was to have a look around and identify the suspects. On January 21st, 2015, the Senate voted that climate change is real and not a hoax. The bill was written by Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, and he is from Rhode Island. Rhode Island is our smallest state, but a quarter of it's near the water. Rising sea levels are not a good thing for Rhode Island. Senator Bernie Sanders is from Vermont, and he is on almost every global warming website. Their statements are going to be very, very important. They both say that most scientists agree that global warming is occurring, and they think humans are the biggest problem. Burning fossil fuels releases carbon dioxide, and that extra carbon dioxide traps the heat in our atmosphere, just like a greenhouse keeps plants warm in winter. So if we put less carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, more of the sun's energy can reflect back into outer space, and the warming will not be so bad. And space is big enough to handle a little extra sunlight. The climate change they are referring to is an increase of high moisture storms, like hurricanes and blizzards, and droughts, like the ones hurting parts of California and Texas. As a solution, Senator Sanders says on his website, it is imperative that we transform our energy system away from fossil fuel. He also said, we need to greatly accelerate the progress we already seeing in the world. Solar, geothermal, biomass, and other forms of sustainable energy. Since I cannot travel all over the world like Nancy Drew does, my investigation will be pretty local. We won't get much wind around here like they do in the rest of the Texas, so that is not a solution, and Texas has embraced alternative energy. Geothermal is a great idea. Looking at the NREL hydrothermal map, all of the geothermal activity is in the Rockies. Biomass is a terrific idea. I would love to see my dad put grass clippings into the lawnmower to power it. That technology is not available, and biomass uses a lot of trees and water. This area is not woody or watery. As for hydroelectric, it looks like you need mountains or tall hills. We don't have either. Solar power is very cool. Sun hits a panel and you make electricity. We get a lot of sun, at least in the summer, so that might be a solution. Let's investigate. Our government is investing a lot of money in solar power. The use of solar power is increasing and the cost is coming down. So how much would it cost to go off the grid at my house? Let's investigate. The government says if you've successfully addressed the low-hanging fruit, like performing energy audits, installing programmable thermostats, and sealing air leaks, it may be time to consider incorporating clean energy into your home. Energy saving strategy. They don't really tell you how to go off the grid. Their main point is to build a system that you can afford and try to get it big enough to sell electricity back to the electric company. It looks like we're going to need about 3,000 square feet of yard for solar panels, pathways, and a shed to house the batteries, backup generator, and supplies. That allows us to cut the cord and get off the grid. Problem number 1. We don't have enough yard for all that. The panels have to be in the sun and not near the house. Reflection off the panels will heat the house during the part of the day. We are running the air conditioner in the summer. Of course, the Homeowners Association wouldn't stand for a front yard full of solar panels and scaffolds. And then there's the cost. It's hard to use the government sites for pricing, but from some university websites, it looks like $50,000 will cover it, if we had the land. So it looks like the only way to get our subdivision off the grid is to buy land almost the size of our subdivision. Cut down all the trees and scrub, and build a solar panel farm, along with buildings for batteries, and a transformer station to build the power up enough to send it through the wires to our houses. That might work around here, where there's a lot of land between towns, but all over in Houston and Galveston, they would have to spread out pretty far and wide to capture enough sunlight. And that got me thinking. If we had to build massive solar farms, what would that look like? And what would happen underneath them? As my grandpa always says, all the answers can be found on scratch paper. So, if solar farms are fighting over the same land as food farms and parks and federal land, there are going to be a lot of solar panels, and there are going to be a lot of low-paying jobs like squeegeeing the panels and picking weeds that grow too tall. And the panels will be casting a giant shadow onto the ground, preventing the energy from the sun from warming the ground. And without lawns and woods and wild space, even though we lower the amount of carbon dioxide by burning far less fossil fuels, we still have too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere because there aren't enough plants to absorb what goes up there anyway. And how much is all that going to cost to build? So that got me thinking. What else puts carbon dioxide into the atmosphere? Humans spend 12 hours every day breathing carbon dioxide into the air, and so do their pets, and their food, and forest fires. But there will be less forest and so not many forest fires. And what else burns? Volcanoes. I should have started with volcanoes. It turns out that we are in the record-breaking decade for volcanic activity, and the activity has gone worse since before 1880. 6 times worse. And carbon dioxide from volcanoes has killed thousands and thousands of people. What a horrible way to die. Oregon State reports that in August 1986, 1,700 people were killed when a large amount of carbon dioxide was released from Lake Nyos. At least 300 people were hospitalized. They have a long list on their website. And they have to be hot. Lava is melted rock. Does any of that lava go into oceans? Wow, it sure does. There are a lot of volcanoes underwater on the ocean floor. That has to be adding heat to the water. Was that good? Okay. Bernie Sanders says this year's extreme warmth is largely driven by the global ocean. It turns out that the oceans and land are like the tortoise and the hare when it comes to temperature. The land heats and cools rapidly and the ocean changes very slowly, up and down. So when a storm at sea meets the land, the winds whip up, the waves get rough, and the water gets high. And that got me thinking, what happens to water after the storm moves onto land?
He's for real!
Oh, what's keeping those two? Grandma, are you all right? I will be as soon as I find my glasses.
Hey, what got into you two? What were you running from anyhow?
The water that was carried onto the land in waves flows back to the ocean. And the sand on the beach got all stirred up, and suddenly there's a lot of stuff floating in the water. That stuff is called total suspended solids, or just dirty water. It's darker than clear water, and that got me thinking some more. When the sun beats down, what gets hotter? Light colors or dark colors? So after the hurricane has passed, there was a huge spot in the ocean that is darker because all of the stuff that has been carried back and stirred up. That huge dark spot is going to heat up faster and more than clearer water around it. And the solids floating near the surface are going to heat up, and those solids are going to retain the heat longer than water. So now we have another question. Does warmer water cause the storms to be more intense, or does the more intense storm cause the water to get warmer? I'm going to have to think about that one. In the meantime, it's time for a break. Stay tuned for Chapter 2. Bye for now.